Hello and welcome back to The Report. As the Conservative Party conference draws to an end, our reporter Nathaneal Amos-Sansam has spent the day in Birmingham asking attendees whether the Conservatives can win back the North.
It couldn't have been a worse start to a conference meant to be all about message discipline ahead of a general election. On the eve of the Conservative Party conference, a second Eurosceptic MP, Murad Quereshi, became the latest member of David Cameron's party to publicly jump ship.
Today, I am leaving the Conservative Party and joining UKIP.
Despite this, the conference has largely stayed on message, that of projecting what the Conservative Party could offer post-2015 and post a coalition with the Liberal Democrats. While the issue of UKIP was never far from the surface, the conference has largely been dominated by Conservative messages about the future and of the economic recovery they say they have secured over the last 4 years. Speaking to the conference, however, George Osborne struck a more serious note. His deficit reduction plan, while cutting national debt in half, is far off course, and so he was quick to point to the economic and political insecurities around the world, to contrast it with the situation at home.
Anyone who thinks that Britain can ease up should look across the Channel. Look to the countries who thought they were out of crisis, eased up, and so now risk returning to crisis. And then there is the wider world beyond. The borders with Russia are aflame, a terrible virus sweeping through West Africa. And we're engaged in a generational struggle against barbaric Islamist extremism.
While there is a growing debate about inequality in British society, a strong and credible challenge to the Conservative message of austerity has yet to emerge, with voters still preferring the economic team of David Cameron and George Osborne over that of Labour's Ed Miliband and Shadow Chancellor Ed Balls. However, to win a majority next year, the Conservatives still face an uphill challenge. In cities like Birmingham, as well as in all major UK cities outside of the south, the Conservatives have been in relative decline for many years. 2 years ago, the local Conservatives, in coalition with the Liberal Democrats, lost control of Birmingham City Council by a landslide to the Labour Party. And on the councils of Manchester, Sheffield and Liverpool, the Conservatives now hold not a single council seat. So the question is, if people support the message, why don't they support the party? The issue perhaps is due to the Conservatives' culturally toxic reputation, with one opinion poll saying that 40% of the electorate would never consider voting for the party. The Conservative Party has been particularly weak among the Muslim community. Studies have shown that at the last election, only 15% of Muslim voters backed the party, compared with over 60% backing the Labour Party. Opinions against the Conservative Party by minority voters may have been reinforced by David Cameron's comments 3 years ago that multiculturalism had failed, and by the government's ongoing crackdown against radical Islam. With their final conference over before the general election next May, the Conservatives are now looking to forge a simple dividing line between themselves and the Labour Party. However, an increasingly complex and diverse electorate is becoming very difficult for one single party to command. Nathaneal Amos-Sansam, The Report.
Well, in the studio to discuss this is Murad Quereshi, Labour London Assembly member. But first, let's take a look at what people have been saying about the conference on Twitter. Dan Hannan, MEP, expressed his view that the PM was spot on about tax cuts, saying, "Tax cuts are the one thing ministers can do to deal with rising living costs." And Daniel R. Hamilton tweeted similar expressions of support. He said that under the Tory government, 1.8 million jobs were created, more than the rest of Europe combined. Well, Murad, it is true that Cameron is offering some pretty dramatic tax cuts in the next Parliament if he's elected. Isn't that going to put Labour a bit on the back foot?
Well, he's also admitted that he's not going to achieve the deficits, reduction in the deficit that he was aiming for in his first 5 years, and that there will have to be another £25 billion worth of cuts in public services. We all know that's going to disproportionately affect many minority communities like Muslims, because those kind of cuts are invariably going to affect the working poor when benefits, entitlements to those to the working poor are going to be cut. So coming from the perspective of many of the viewers of this programme, Sam. I doubt they'll see the benefits of much of what of the rhetoric we're hearing economically, or rather financially, from the Tories.
Raising the tax threshold is quite attractive for people who are on very low incomes.
That's true, but at the same time, it'll be interesting to see whether that's something that they want to do over the lifetime of the next parliamentary session. There's qualifications made to it, but they began this coalition government with tax reductions for the top rate of tax for millionaires. So we'll see which gets done first and what the priorities fall into line if they do get into government for a second term after next May.
Well, what about the other issue which David Cameron today stressed, the NHS? I mean, that's always been Labour's strongest card, but he's now saying that he's going to increase spending over the lifetime of the next Parliament.
Well, look, he can say that, but you can only go by the evidence of what he's done, for example, in London in his premiership so far. We've seen a reduction of 4 A&Es in Greater London, along with many GP services affected by reduction in the finances towards them. Now that's happened in a London context with a growing population, and not only a growing population, an ageing population. So I think the proof in the pudding is what he's been up to so far with the NHS. And as far as the NHS is concerned, as you heard last week from Ed Miliband, a clear commitment to raise the number of doctors, nurses and care workers on the back of a mansion tax, which will fund this all to the tune of £2.5 billion.
Now, UKIP we showed in the clip at the beginning of the discussion. I mean, that was showing how people from UKIP are switching, or rather from the Conservatives are switching to UKIP. But aren't there a lot of Labour voters who might be attracted by UKIP, their line on Europe, immigration and so on?
Well, it'd be interesting to see. We haven't had the defections that the Tories have had. We've seen not just 2 MPs defect to UKIP. We've also seen the rank and file Tory members do so. In the London context, we've heard an ex-Assembly member become a UKIP member who used to be a member for Hillingdon and Ealing. So it's had more impact on the right than it has on the left, and we have got a by-election on the 9th of October in a Labour stronghold up in Haywood and up in Manchester, in Greater Manchester, which will be an interesting test for us. But I doubt we'll be losing that seat on the back of a UKIP vote by working class folk who may have had overtures made to them on the basis of immigration.
So you laugh off the Cameron line today when he told voters, you may go to bed with Nigel Farage, but you'll wake up with Ed Miliband.
Well, I mean, it was an interesting joke to make, but I think at the moment, Mr. Farage has had all the laughs, and I'm sure that will continue for a little longer than he realises.
Well, on that note, thank you very much for coming in. And that's all the time we have for this episode of The Report. I want to thank all my guests in the various segments on today's show. Thank you at home for watching. Do remember you can keep up with us on Twitter by following @IslamChannel, by using the hashtag #TheReport. We're back tomorrow evening at the same time. But for now, we'll leave you with some footage from Hong Kong, where thousands of pro-democracy protesters have still been marching through the streets of the city, and they made today National Day celebrations uneasy. Until tomorrow.